In Northport, Florida, the search for Brian Laundrie continues. Tonight, new information regarding a burner phone seized by the FBI. Will this be the key to the investigation?
We're out here with our law enforcement partners. We're searching for Brian Laundrie in the Courttv Preserve. We've deployed numerous resources, and we are trying to cover every acre in this preserve.
In tonight's Unsolved Case file in Moab, Utah, newlyweds Kylan Schulte and Crystal Turner, living the van life, are murdered and left by a creek. Tonight, we speak with Kylan's family.
She looks at the site and sees a body and tells my brother that he sent a text that said it's Kylan and Crystal.
In Phoenix, Arizona, police confront a naked man in the road. They subdue him, and he later dies at the hospital. We break down the video with our law enforcement experts.
Sit down.
What's that?
In Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, drive-by shooting caught on camera, but the suspect's not caught yet. We take a look at the video during crime time. I'm Vinny Politan. Thanks so much for joining us tonight here on Closing Arguments. And we have a lot to get to this hour. And we're going to begin, of course, the search for Brian Laundrie continues. And we're going to get into some of the newest developments. And take a look here. This is the FBI today, back at the home of the Laundries. And they went inside. They gathered some articles inside. But they were also seen a little bit after this coming outside onto the driveway and looking inside and crawling inside the Laundrie's camper. Now, we're not talking about the van that Brian and Gabby drove around the country and Brian drove by himself back. We're talking about the camper in the driveway there on the right. That belongs to the parents. That's their camper. So the FBI was taking a look at that today as well. What were they looking for? What did they find? How could that help in the search for Brian Laundrie? What evidence? Also, a statement today released by the Laundrie family attorney at this point. And the statement reads, the FBI is at the Laundrie home today to collect some personal items belonging to Brian that will assist the canines in their search for Brian. All right, we get it, right? They sniff the items and they search. Now listen to this, though. This is huge. A cell phone belonging to Brian was collected for analysis. There is nothing more to this. Oh, maybe there is a little bit more. When the FBI gets a hold of your phone and it's an extra phone, some have referred to it as a burner phone. Big developments today. Now, Camila Burnell, great reporter, has put together a timeline of Brian and his family's travels and the phone and kind of putting it together as to what was going on down in Northport, Florida. Take a listen.
As authorities continue to search for Brian Laundrie, a timeline becomes clearer. And a former FBI agent says the extent of his parents' involvement is still in question.
See, they had 10 days to 2 weeks to plan how Brian was going to leave.
Before Gabby Petito's family reported her missing, between September 6 and 8, the Laundrie family stayed at a Florida campground about 75 miles from their Northport home.
In my mind, the only thing that would explain the behaviors of the Laundrie family are people who are trying to protect and assist their son.
Though authorities have not explicitly connected Laundrie to Petito's death, they are looking for him in part as a response to a federal arrest warrant, accusing him of illegally using another person's debit card. On September 4th, Brian Laundrie purchased a new cell phone, according to his family's attorney. 10 days later, his parents told authorities he was last seen leaving their home for a nature reserve. Then, on September 19th, Petito's remains were found. Her death was ruled a homicide. Petito's family and their attorney pleading for Laundrie to do the right thing.
Brian We're asking you to turn yourself in.
I'm Camila Bernal reporting.
All right, several things we need to go through and unpack tonight. Let's bring in our great guests joining us by phone in Chicago, Illinois, private investigator Erica Morse. In New York, a private investigator who's featured in the Crime and Punishment documentary and the founder of the Black Ops Private Investigators. Manuel Gomez is with us. And in Long Island, New York, a former commander with the United States Marshal Service who ran the New York and New Jersey Regional Fugitive Task Force for the past 3 decades. Lenny DePaul is with us. Great to have everyone here. Lenny, let me begin with you. You've tracked some fugitives in your days, like many, many fugitives. Let me start with this phone and your thoughts about this purchase of a phone on the 4th. It's now been seized by the FBI, and burner phones in general, how they're used by fugitives.
Well, good evening, Vinny, and thanks for having me on. And that's critical, especially in this type of a fugitive investigation. Right now, law enforcement is chasing a ghost. I mean, Brian Laundrie's gone dark. He's off the grid. He's laying low. I'm sure he's sleeping with one eye open. You know, they got a video of him and his mom entering an AT&T store in his hometown. They grab apparently a burner phone, prepaid phone, throwaway phone, whatever you want to call it. And then the FBI picks it up during their search warrant when they're executing their search warrant in their home. What's that all about? And was that phone supposed to be there for mom and dad to communicate him when he's on the run? That's anyone's guess. How many other phones did they pick up? I mean, burner phones, we all know, is you don't need a subscriber, you don't need an address, you don't need a name attached to it. And, you know, they throw these things away left and right. I've arrested people with 5, 6 burner phones in their pocket. So they feel they can run with this thing, but it doesn't work well for them.
Manuel Gomez, I've never come across, in my years at Courttv and covering crime and justice for decades, I've never come across a situation where someone has an innocent reason for a burner phone.
Well, the marshal said it correct. You know, they don't have an innocent reason. This is to cover up their duplicitous acts and to make sure that they think that they're getting away with conversations that are not being tapped and so forth. And they cover it up by purchasing these phones in Kmart and Walmart for like $20. And they're very easy. Unfortunately, it does make it difficult for law enforcement, but I don't believe that this phone was purchased for anything other than to deceive and have secret conversations with his family regarding the death of Gabby.
Erica Morse, FBI has their hands on it now. They'll go through it, try to figure out what they can, if anything, from this phone that was apparently purchased on September 4th. But the search continues. And I have no idea where this guy is, obviously. Do you think that investigators are getting closer? Or do you think they are kind of the way the rest of us are, kind of thinking he could be there, he could be here, he could be anywhere?
With every day that goes by, the FBI learns more. And that's the good part about this moving along, you know, taking a little bit of time, is they're learning more. Them physically having possession of the phone, I think is going to be a gold mine for them, because it prohibits them from having to go get individual warrants from individual app companies. They've got the apps, the texts, the messages right there on that phone, and that's actually going to just expedite the process. Now, Lenny had actually said something in a previous interview, I think it was yesterday or today, that Brian Laundrie is sleeping with one eye open and he's going to be caught. And I agree with that. I've been saying that all along. I don't think they're looking for a body at this point. And he's also getting exhausted. He's running out of resources. He's running out of options. He doesn't have those cards anymore to utilize because the authorities are onto him on that. And so I think he's getting desperate.
Lenny, how can a fugitive, someone who's wanted, knows that they're wanted, how do they stay out of sight? And someone like this, I mean, I'm looking at Brian Laundrie, 23-year-old, not a career criminal, but he is a bit of a hiker, an outdoor enthusiast. He's an environmentalist, doesn't like to drink water out of plastic bottles. How can he survive out there?
It's difficult, Vinny. I mean, it's something where a guy like him, he's on the run. He's got maybe a 10-day head start on law enforcement. But he's, I always say you can run, but you can't hide. And when you run, you only go to jail tired. His photo is nationwide. I mean, his photos, you guys are doing a great job with this. Social media is fired up. There's, I think, up to $180,000 reward out there. And we all know the streets talk with money. So, it's a matter of time. The public needs to remain vigilant. Law enforcement, these manhunters, the fugitive investigators, they're putting that puzzle together. They're connecting the dots. They're going back to choke points. I mean, he came across country. He had plenty of time to make phone calls, set the table on what he wants to do. The big question is, who is he calling? Who's that trusted circle of friends? Who's who in the zoo, I like to say. And investigators are all over those people. They're turning their worlds upside down. He's using a secured app. He's using some sort of communication. But right now, he's dark. He's off the grid. He's playing fugitive. And again, he is sleeping with one eye open, and hopefully it's a matter of time. The bigger question is, what's his mindset? Is it suicide by cop once that news tightens up and they get a beat on him? Or is he just going to throw his hands up and give up? I hope the latter, and I hope this thing gets put to bed sooner than later.
Manuel Gomez, when he came back, right, he comes back on the 1st of September, alone, without Gabby. We know where Gabby was found. And then purchases the phone on the 4th. And then there's a family camping trip from the 6th to the 8th. Mom, dad, and son get into the truck and the camper, and they go on this trip. I don't understand. What does that mean? Like, and this is before the world knows about Gabby Petito, before the world knows about Brian Laundrie. But I'm trying to figure out the mindset here. All three of them, obviously at that point, know that Gabby's missing. They're not telling Gabby's family. They're not responding to Gabby's family, but they're like going camping.
Well, I don't believe they were going camping. Like I said on a previous interview, they loaded up that vehicle with supplies. They knew exactly what they were going to do. They knew they were going to get him to a location and get him the stuff that he needed to be off the grid. And that's why I am so excited and happy that the FBI has finally now looked at the Laundrie's mother and father's camper and vehicle, because this is where that stuff was going. So they're tracing any clues that are possibly in there, and this shows that they're not as innocent as they're trying to portray. There's no doubt in my mind that they know where he is and that they facilitated the supplies for him to hide this long. No doubt.
Erica Morse, and again, folks, I have to keep stressing, and I do it because we're Courttv. The lawyer for the parents say they know nothing, they have no idea where he is, and they're wondering as much as everyone else. Erica Morse, let me ask you about that camping trip. It's very peculiar, to say the least, because they already know Gabby didn't come back. Gabby was living in their home. It's like two people leave a home and one comes back. I mean, they know something is up. And I don't know if Brian Laundrie is being truthful with his parents or not, what he told them, but he has to say something, because they're going to ask the question, Erica, aren't they? Like, where's Gabby?
They are going to ask the question, but, when my child tells me something, I tend to believe her until proven otherwise. That's just how parents are. And I'm an investigator. We by nature want to believe that our children are telling us the truth. We have no idea what Brian, what bill of goods potentially he could have sold his parents when he got back. For all they know or knew at the time, Brian and Gabby had an argument, decided to go their separate ways, and she was back with her family safely. And he took the van because she didn't feel comfortable driving it. That's a really good, thing to sell. I think, however, though, as the investigation continued, it may have become an issue of wanting to protect her son. And I speak more to mom on this than I do dad, because I just know a mother's instincts. I can speak to them. That camping trip appears brazen on the surface, but I think Manny's absolutely right. I think that this was a supply trip, and it also appeared very normal. Because if you look at the check-ins and the way mom was signing in at the campsite and going to the water, there was a water site or a water area there. Mom checked in there. Very natural, appearing very normal. And so I think that they were trying to portray something that was just a family camping trip when they were really secretly planning for something else.
Yeah, Lenny, I can't imagine it was just a normal trip because, one, Gabby's not there. Now, if Brian is telling his parents, yeah, we broke up, and she went her way, I went my way, when police come knocking at their door, they are prepared. They've got their attorney's business card ready to hand over to police, and police never see Brian. So it seems to me he had to tell them more than just we broke up. I mean, there had to be some sense that the parents knew that they needed a lawyer, so they'd have to receive some information that would lead them down that road.
100%. I mean, that speaks volumes in itself. I mean, you can go back to the Carlton Reserve, that whole deal with his Mustang. Tells his parents, "Look, I'm going to go meditate. I'm going to hike through the woods." He was well aware of where he was going, knew the area well. Ends up tripping, I think, a deer run camera. Gets a picture of himself with a backpack. "Hey guys, here I am." I think he turns around, he goes back out, he jumps in with a buddy, and he's in the wind. However, 2 days later, I think the parents show up to pick up the Mustang. And I'm saying to myself, well, what do you want him to walk home after he meditated? I mean, none of anything they're saying just doesn't make sense to me. Factor into the equation the arrest warrant that's in place. The FBI was able to get the bank fraud warrant out of Wyoming. That speaks volumes for law enforcement. They've got now a legal document to make a forced entry if needed. And they can also use that for ammunition, Vinny, as you know. Harboring a fugitive and aiding and abetting on a federal charge, I think it's a 5-year mandatory minimum. That's nothing to play around with. So they could use that, as leverage going into any conversation. So if mom and dad, I get it. I've hunted down violent felony fugitives for 3 decades. I've sat down with mom at the kitchen table, and the first question I ask them, if your son, if you knew where your son was, would you tell me? And 9 times out of 10, they'd say no. That tells me 2 things. 1, they know where he is. And number 2, I'm going to take a hard look at mom and dad, and again, that trusted circle of friends, and turn their worlds upside down. I mean, they're putting this puzzle together and connecting the dots. These fugitive investigators, and like I said earlier, hopefully it's a matter of time before this thing is over.
Absolutely. Erica Morse, Manuel Gomez are going to stay with us. Lenny, I want to thank you. And I have a quick question. Did you ever track down any of these fugitives and bring them back to my father's courtroom in New Jersey?
A couple hundred times.
There you go.
Yes, I have. Absolutely.
Good stuff. Thanks.
I know you well.
All right. Thanks so
Thanks
much,
for
Lenny.
having me.
Appreciate it. All right, folks. When we come back, another case. This was the first case out of Moab, Utah that we covered here on Closing Arguments. Newlywed couple also living the van life go missing, then are found murdered. Well, tonight we're going to speak with one of the victim's aunts and also take a look at what, if any, connection there is to the case involving Gabby and Brian, and what connection it may have to another fugitive who was caught, a fugitive from Kansas who was caught out in Utah. We'll talk about that when we return. It's time to open up tonight's Unsolved Case file. This is where we're asking for your help. If you know anything, please pick up the phone tonight and make that call. Tonight's story involves another couple that was living the van life. But this couple actually loved each other, were looking out for each other. Kylan Schulte and Crystal Turner, recently married and working jobs, but also living in nature and living the van life, the victims of a double homicide. Brian Schnee, great reporter from KSTU in Salt Lake City, Utah, has the latest.
We don't feel safe. Moab is crying out a plea that we do not feel safe.
The message Sean Paul Schulte has been hearing from some local residents. It's been roughly 5 weeks since the bodies of Kylan Schulte and Crystal Turner were found in the LaSalle Mountains outside of Moab. In the weeks since, Kylan's father, Sean Paul, has taken it upon himself to try and get some answers.
All I did was just provide a venue for local folks to come down and tell me clues.
Each day, he puts up what he calls his clue booth at a local park in Moab. From there, he hopes people will come out.
Over 2 weeks, I probably got 30 or 35 clues. And, maybe only 4 or 5 of them were not really good clues.
He takes the clues and calls them in to either the Grand County Sheriff's Office or the FBI tip line. With no publicly named suspect or significant update from law enforcement over the past few weeks, Sean Paul doesn't want this case to go cold.
I want everyone, I want the hikers, the bikers, the jeepers, I want everyone to think and double check your dash cam and remember the girls were missing on the 13th of August and found on the 18th of August. So let's focus on the mountain during those times.
The most recent update from law enforcement came last week, but didn't reference anything specific pertaining to the double homicide investigation. Grand County Sheriff's Office, who's handling the investigation, discredited the timelines between Kylan and Crystal's murder and when Gabby Petito and Brian Laundrie were in town. The Sheriff's Office would not share how they came to this conclusion. So for now, Sean Paul is seemingly leading the charge on the ground and keeping people aware on social media.
I mean, we need real clues that can identify a suspect, not, Gabby and Brian were close to us.
Okay, folks, here's the phone number, 435-259-8115. That's the Grand County Sheriff's Office, and maybe you're traveling through the area. Again, 435-259-8115. That's one of the challenges here, right? These are areas where people are kind of going on vacation, seeing the country, seeing the beauty. And, you're in town, then you're out of town all of a sudden. The Grand County Sheriff's Office has also released a statement. I want to read that right off the top to you. It's a press release saying that the Grand County Sheriff's Office has and continues to follow up with any information and tips received regarding the homicide investigation. The response has benefited this office in the investigation of the case. We are asking that anyone who would have been in the South Mesa area between the dates of August 13th to the 14th and 15th contact our office with anything they may have seen or heard. The Grand County Sheriff's Office has enlisted numerous labs and technicians to assist in the forensic analysis of items of interest in the case. That analysis may take several months to complete. The Grand County Sheriff's Office understands the public concern and speculation concerning this case and will, when available, release any information that does not impede the investigatory process. The Grand County Sheriff's Office appreciates the support available within the community directed towards both law enforcement and the public. Again, they need your help. That's to me, that's the bottom line in all of this and where we are in the case. Still with us tonight, private investigators Erica Morse and Manuel Gomez. And joining us tonight in Maryland is Kylan Schulte's aunt, Bridget Calvert. Bridget, thanks so much for joining us tonight. And our sympathies and our thoughts are with you and your family. And it's a terrible time for you. But you have some unanswered questions that need to be answered and some justice that your family deserves. First of all, what's your frame of mind right now? What's your frame of mind of where you are and where you think the investigation is and how you're feeling about how things are going?
So I can say right now, one of my biggest concerns is Kylan and Crystal's case becoming a cold case, and that I feel like our family is driving the investigation more than anyone else. Sean Paul is the boots on the ground. And I and my cousins are running a Facebook group that's Justice for Kylan and Crystal. We are doing so much of the work to try to get national coverage and try to get the word, because Moab is such a huge tourism community. Like you said, there anybody could have information, but to get the word out, and we just don't have the coverage like other cases, like listening to you cover Gabby and Brian, and it's how do we get that coverage? We're kind of in between where there's missing people that get no coverage, and we're trying to make our own coverage happen. We have people doing media spam days where they're trying to post anywhere and everywhere to get coverage. And it's not just to have the story heard, it's because we need answers. Yesterday marked 6 weeks since their bodies were found. And we don't know if still somebody might have dash cam, someone might have a GoPro. It's a tourist destination. And if anybody might have something and still hasn't heard the story. So we need to know if there's something out there that can help break this case and find out who killed Kylan and Crystal.
Absolutely. I mean, that's why we do this segment every night on the show, our Unsolved Case file. Bridget, I have Erica Morse is with, a private investigator who's worked with many families who unfortunately have been in the same position that you're in. Erica, how do they keep this case from going cold? How do they get their answers?
Hi, Bridget. First of all, just kudos to you and to the family for everything you are doing to keep this situation front and center. And please accept my deepest condolences on your loss. I am so terribly sorry. You're doing everything right. And you're right. There is a disparity in the way cases are reported. And I have spoken with so many families over the past month who feel that same frustration and desperation that you all do. And the only thing I can say to any of you right now is that Gabby's case has brought forth a critical conversation about those disparities. And we as advocates and those investigators, PIs who focus on the missing, we're listening and the media's listening. And we're trying to get those conversations with law enforcement to better help them understand that they can't wait 24 hours to take a missing persons report. There is a lot broken in this system. I get it. I've been doing this work for over a decade. And with 2,000 to 5,000 people disappearing on a daily basis, and then 30 to 50% of them returning home on a daily basis, it is next to impossible to keep track of everyone. However, you are doing everything right, and so is the rest of the family. I will get into that Facebook group because I have a lot of ideas to share with you, a lot of ideas to share with the family. And one of the ones that I want you to work on right now is to get in contact with your local TV stations, because November is what's called a sweeps month. And there are certain times of the year where there are television sweeps for their ratings. And they are allowed to do, by their networks and their parent companies, longer feature stories. Instead of doing maybe a 30 or 60-second segment, they can do a 2 to 5 minute package. That will give you more exposure that we can then turn around and continue to push on the internet. We know the system is broken. We know not every missing person is getting, or murdered person is getting, ample amount of coverage. And I can tell you that we are very encouraged by the amount of internet sleuths and what they call armchair detectives who have cropped up in these cases, because we're training them to be the next generation of advocates. And we're doing everything we can to get them up to speed. You keep doing everything you can do. You're doing it right. Amazing job on that timeline, by the way, Bridget. Amazing.
Oh, thank you. Thank you so much. I tried to make sure it's only factual. So
yeah.
Well, you did it, and you went back several years, and that was actually very helpful. I didn't know about the Harley until I read it in your timeline, and I do agree that both those vehicles being left in town is a big red flag.
Yes. And that's why, and honestly, when my brother was trying to get the authorities to look for them, and they would only do an attempt to locate because they were an adult missing people. So they browsed campgrounds is kind of how we feel. And so then it was Cindy Sue the next day that found them, because he made that call for help to the public of Moab, find my girls. I know they are missing because of these reasons. So it was a friend that found them, knowing, okay, Sean Paul wouldn't be saying these things and asking for this help if it wasn't, I mean, he knows they're missing for these reasons.
Manuel Gomez, let me bring you into the conversation. From your perspective, what do you think is going to be the key here for Bridget and her family to get an answer, to get some justice?
Well, I think one of the keys is that what Bridget's doing right now, like the other investigator said, I commend you on your putting out the media on it and pushing it and keeping it relevant, okay? But you need to do something more. What you need to do, a recommendation is that you should go to the congressmen, the assembly members, and let them know that we have to have an alert system so that their deaths are not in vain. Because what Crystal Turner and Kylie Schulte's death reveals is they show, finally getting national attention, that there is a evil that lurks in our parks. They are perfect hunting grounds for predators and disposal sites for them to kill people. And then the mere transient nature and visitors that visit these parks allow killers and predators to mingle and go undetected. And then, you know, I was even more disturbed as I was investigating this case. Do you know that there is a National Parks Service website? It's called SAR, S-A-R, Search and Rescue. And they show you the actual numbers of people that are killed and go missing in these parks every year. And there are hundreds of them that go unnoticed. We should not let these two girls' deaths go in vain. We need to have legislation to put that alert system. And I ask you, please, with your family and the effort you're doing, do that. Go to your Congress member and make this happen. Because you know what? That's a silent crisis, and finally it's getting noticed.
Absolutely. Bridget, what we do here, we don't do stories once. We've done this story before. We're going to stay on it. You'll get more calls from our producers to join us again. Again, our thoughts are with you, and I hope someday we're talking here and you get the justice that you deserve. Erica Morse, Manuel Gomez, two great private investigators. Thank you so much for your time and your insight. We'll speak again as well. Still ahead.
Thank you all so much. Thanks for